For first-time viewers of The Sopranos, sometimes the series can get confusing, as many characters come and go throughout the series' 6 seasons. Whether this is characters getting whacked, or just appearing or disappearing from the series, or learning who is made, who is a captain, and who is an associate. That is why in this video, I'm going to break it down for you all season by season, main storyline by main storyline, and understanding The Sopranos for beginners. This is The Sopranos for Dummies. Just wanted to give a warning for anyone who hasn't seen the series and is watching this video. There will be spoilers in this video, so before we get started, if you're new here, be sure to click subscribe and click the bell to get notifications on all upcoming Sopranos content. And be sure to follow me on all my socials like X, Instagram, and Patreon. All links will be linked below. While the series itself is called The Sopranos, the fictional mafia family that the characters of The Sopranos run is actually called the DiMeo crime family. It's said that the DiMeo crime family originated in North New Jersey sometime between the early 1900s and 1950s. And in the show, we learn from Agent Harris that the DiMeos assisted the military in protecting the Brooklyn Navy Yard.
You know, World War II, your outfit protected the Brooklyn Navy Yard. I think Roosevelt told Vito Genovese where Hitler was holed up.
At this time, it's believed that Ecoli DiMeo was the apparent boss of the family. Made members of the DiMeo family during this time consisted of Johnny Boy Soprano, alongside his brother and Uncle Jr., as well as other familiar names and faces like Feech Lamanna, Paulie Walnuts, and Dickie Moltisanti, who we saw in The Many Saints of Newark, the prequel film to The Sopranos. With plenty of Sopranos in the DiMeo crew at the time, it was clear that the Sopranos were an integral part of the family, as they also maintained a close relationship with New York, specifically the Lupertazis, who were led by Carmine Lupertazzi Sr. Throughout the series, we see that the Sopranos specialize in many criminal activities, from bookmaking, extortion, loan sharking, racketeering, jury tampering, calling card fraud, construction violations, credit card fraud, drug trafficking, stock market fraud, illegal gambling, money laundering, mortgage fraud, murder, as well as truck hijacking are just a few ways the Sopranos makes money and conducts business. Throughout the series, while The Sopranos and its members conduct business illegally, there are, however, many fronts that the family uses to launder money, hide incriminating evidence and illegal fire weapons, and host illegal gambling rings, as well as murder individuals. In the pilot episode of the series, we learned that Tony's official job title is a waste management consultant for Barone Sanitation. As the series progresses, we learn that garbage routes were bread and butter for Tony and his crew. The many fronts that the Soprano family and Tony and his crew use consist of the Bada Bing Strip Club, where Silvio is the owner and manager of the club along with Tony. We also see Satriale's pork store. While Satriale's does specialize in selling and distributing cured meats, it's also a place where individuals are murdered, like we saw with Emil Kolar and Fat Dom Gamiello. And throughout the series, we see individuals get dismembered throughout Satriale's pork store, like we saw with Richie April. We also learned that Tony owned Caputo's poultry store, in which he later sold to Jamba Juice. It's not just Tony and his crew that have fronts all over the city, as there are many fronts throughout the series. We see Uncle Jr. receive protection money from Comley Trucking. Christopher, Adriana, and Furio are all partners of the Crazy Horse nightclub. As well, Tony and his crew have many construction companies in their pockets, like Fernandez Paving and Spatafor Construction. It's evident that the Sopranos have many ties to the unions that reside around North New Jersey, whether this is through the ports, construction, steelworkers, roofing, engineers, or the United States Department of Labor. This is all due in part to one of Tony's associates, an Assemblyman Zellman, who acts as a political operative assistant to Tony and also helps him, as well as New York, later secure the Esplanade construction project. When the first season of The Sopranos begins, Of course, the main character of the series is Tony Soprano. However, when we are first introduced to Tony, while he may be the boss at home, he's not really the boss of his respected family, as this title belongs to the acting boss of the family in Jackie Aprile Sr. As the family's actual boss, Eckerly DiMeo, is serving a life sentence in prison. And throughout the series, we hear Eckerly's name come up in conversation between Tony and Uncle Junior, but we never hear anything about the mysterious leader again. And as the series progresses, we never learn about how Eckerly has passed away, or when for that matter.
Who the fuck is Eckel?
Eckerly. Let's talk about something else.
No, you open this clam, my friend. Who is he?
He was my younger brother. He was between me and your father in age. His name was Eckerly.
At the time of the first season, Tony and 5 others are captains, as the 5 other captains consist of Uncle Junior, Raymond Curto, Jimmy Altieri, Larry Baris, and Jackie Aprile's crew. Tony is a captain after the death of his father, who promoted him to taking over his crew before he died. Tony's crew consists of the main characters that we see throughout the series: Silvio Dante, Paulie Walnuts, Sal, Big Pussy Bonpincero, and Christopher Moltisanti. And throughout the series, we see Hesh Rabkin act as a Shylock for Tony's crew. Uncle Junior's crew consists of Mikey Palmise, Chucky Signore, and Joseph Bebby Sasso, who was Junior's underboss while Junior was at the helm. The 3 other captains, Raymond, Jimmy, and Larry, do run their respected crews. But as the series progresses, we know less and less about each member of their crew, as we are only introduced to a handful of characters from all remaining crews. And throughout the first season, we watch as Jackie Aprile passes away from cancer. As a result, Junior is promoted to boss, ultimately renaming the family from the DiMeo family to the Soprano family. As the series progresses, while the rise of Tony Soprano can be traced back to the 1980s, when Tony, Jackie, and others took down Feech LaManna's card game, by the start of season 2, Tony has essentially taken over as boss of the family, even though Junior is still technically the boss while he's in jail. As a result of this, Silvio moves up to become Tony's consigliere. So too does Paulie, and takes over as captain of Tony's crew. Throughout this season, there are plenty of new faces that join the Soprano family. Here, we're introduced to the character of Furio Giunta, a made member of the Zucca family from Italy that the Sopranos does business with. In this season, we also see the return of Richie Aprile, who takes over the Aprile crew after his older brother Jackie passes away. In this crew is one of his nephews in Vito Spatafore, Eugene Pontecorvo, and a side character of Donnie K. As time would progress throughout season 2, captains of the Aprile crew would constantly change. This is due in part to almost every one of its captains dying prematurely, whether it would be Gigi Sestone, Ralph Cifaretto, or Eugene Pontecorvo. Also during this season, we would see the addition of Bobby Bacala, who would be an integral part of the series going forward. Also in Junior's crew were Philly and Patsy Parisi, not until Tony decided to bring them over to his crew. Throughout The Sopranos, there are many main storylines that change the outcome of the series. The first is the war that took place during the first season, as throughout this season, there are many integral components to this war. From the torching of Artie's restaurant Vesuvio to Tony discovering Uncle Junior's sexual tendencies. But in the 4th episode of the first season, Meadowlands, tensions between Uncle Junior and Tony were at an all-time high, as Uncle Junior decided to whack Brendan Felone thanks to Michael Palmise, and mock execution Christopher Moltisanti as payback for hijacking Comley Trucking, a business that is controlled by Uncle Junior. To calm things down, Tony decides to let Uncle Junior have his day by giving him the title as boss. However, Junior was only the boss in name and for the feds, as Tony still controlled a majority of the family, including the captains. For what seemed to have tempers cooled down, tensions began to rise again once Tony's mother, Livia Soprano, revealed to Uncle Junior that Tony had been seeing a psychiatrist in Dr. Melfi, and having secret meetings at Green Grove with Junior's captains. Because of this, an assassination attempt was placed on Tony, only resulting in an injury to his ear. Once Tony got word from Agent Harris that the attempted hit was made by his uncle, but also his mother, Tony sought revenge by ordering the hits of Chucky Signore, Mikey Palmise, and recruiting some of Junior's former soldiers like Patsy and Gigi Sestone. Heading into season 2, it seemed everything was going good for Tony and his crew. Richie April was in the Bermuda Triangle thanks to Tony's sister Janice, and Uncle Junior was in jail. However, things took a turn when Tony discovered, thanks to a food poisoning dream, that longtime friend and soldier Sal Bumpincero, also known as Big Pussy, was working for the government after getting busted for selling heroin in 1999. Sadly, Tony, accompanied by Silvio and Polly, killed Bumpincero on Tony's boat the Stugats and later dumped him into the ocean. As season 3 came, so did the FBI into the sausage factory. After losing informant Bumpincero, the FBI tried new ways to gather incriminating evidence on Tony Soprano by sneaking their way into his home and planting a bug in a lamp downstairs in the basement where Tony feels safe. Sadly for the FBI, Tony's daughter Meadow eventually takes the lamp with her to college. Season 3 is one of the busiest seasons of The Sopranos. We learn that Tony's mother Livia unexpectedly passes away, Uncle Junior gets diagnosed with cancer, Christopher and Eugene Pontecorvo get made, the introduction of Benny Fazio, criminal mastermind, and Gloria Trillo are introduced to us, as well as the deaths of Gigi Sestone, Bada Bing dancer Tracy, and Jackie April Jr. Heading into season 4, we saw Ralph Cifaretto be appointed captain of the April crew after Gigi Sestone passed away. Because of this, Tony unwillingly makes Ralph captain. Also, we are introduced to a new captain, Carlo Gervasi, who takes over Jimmy Altieri's crew. It's also during this time where Ralph purchases a horse from Hesh named Pyomai. Pyomai unexpectedly dies in a stable fire. Looking to prove his hunch right, Tony discovers that Ralph set the stable on fire in order to collect the insurance money to pay for his son's hospital bills. A startled and devastated Tony ultimately kills Ralph and later blames the murder on New York, but specifically John Sacrimoni, as the two were connected thanks to an off-color remark that Ralph told about Sacrimoni's wife Ginny at the beginning of the season. With another April captain deceased, Vito Spatafora was promoted to captain. Christopher also got promoted to acting captain, while Paulie Walnuts was jailed for a gun charge. Season 4 also saw the shocking news of Adriana Lacerva become a government informant, but more importantly, season 4 ended with the divorce of Tony and Carmela. By the start of season 5, there were many new faces in the Sopranos universe. The class of 2004 was released from prison. This consisted of both members from the Lupertazzi family and the Soprano family, as Phil Leotardo and Angelo Gureppe made up lost ground in New York, while Tony Blundetto and Feech Lamanna rejoined the Soprano family. While once starting to go straight and eventually drifting back towards a life of crime, Tony Blundetto is the main cause and effect for the war that took place throughout the 5th season, as Blundetto whacked Bill Leotardo for payback for Phil Leotardo killing a close cellmate of his in Angelo Gureppe. Season 5 ended with the murders of Adriana Lacerva and Blundetto getting whacked by his own cousin in Tony as a result to put an end to the war between the two families. Following his house arrest, Uncle Junior would develop signs of Alzheimer's during season 5, and naturally this carried over into season 6, which ultimately carried over to Uncle Junior shooting Tony Soprano in the first episode of season 6. Along with this, we saw Eugene Pontecorvo commit suicide after Tony rejected his claim to move to Florida. It was also revealed to us that Pontecorvo was also an informant. With Junior in a mental facility, the remaining captains of the family decided to cut all ties to Uncle Junior. With the boss of the family in a coma, Silvio takes over as acting boss of the Sopranos. Eventually, after a near-death experience, Tony would awake from his coma, making him now the official boss in title and in power, something that was long overdue for 6 seasons now. After this, it was discovered that Soprano captain Vito Spatafora was a homosexual. As a result, Vito fled only to return months later, hoping to rejoin the family. Before Tony could make a decision, he was ultimately whacked by New York and Phil Leotardo. This led to the war increasing between the two families, as Soprano underboss Bobby Baccalieri was murdered when infamously buying a train set, and Silvio and Patsy are gunned down when trying to leave the Bada Bing. Because of the ongoing war, a meeting between the two families was arranged thanks to George Pagliari, a retired boss of one of the 5 families. During this meeting, the Lupertazzis arranged to pay Tony a small fee to his sister for murdering her husband in Bobby, but still refused to give up the whereabouts of Phil's location. Thanks to his close-knit relationship that dated back to season 1 with Agent Harris, Tony learned the whereabouts of Leotardo to ultimately ultimately have him whacked by Walden Belfiore, a soldier in the Soprano family. As the series was coming to a close, later on Carlo Gervasi disappeared, and it would later be revealed that he flipped after his son Jason was arrested for selling ecstasy. Unlike the other informants in the past, Carlo flipping would be a life-changing decision for Tony and the family, as Carlo knew a tremendous amount of information on the Soprano family business, whether this was in construction or the ports. It's possible the 5 families would be looking for payback due to Phil being whacked in front of his family. Either way, the Soprano family was in a difficult situation, with most of its members either dead, in prison, hospitalized, or were next to be whacked by New York. As the series ends with Tony and his family at Holston's diner, sharing a plate of onion rings, then suddenly cutting to black, leaving the ending open to interpretation. Myself and many others on YouTube have talked at length about what possibly could have happened to Tony. If you're interested, links will be linked below. Did I leave anything out of this video? Let me know down in the comment section below. This was a long video to write and edit for. If you enjoyed it, be sure to click like, as it really helps the channel grow towards 70,000 subscribers. As always, for more Sopranos content, keep it locked here, right here on this channel.